Welcome to the F50 Woman Podcast, dedicated to sharing stories from a diverse community of women in order to provoke you into a passionate pursuit of life, build unshakable character, and achieve extraordinary things. Now, here is your host, Julia Jack.
She grew up in an authoritarian religious family of emotional eaters, which would result in her becoming an extremely accomplished but emotionally suppressed young woman. Memories of gifts of sugar treats taught her to care for herself with food. She now agrees that the mental food cycle is craziness. Are you ready to be done with the craziness? Are you ready to finally trust yourself with food? Then tune in and begin your journey to release yourself from decades of self-disrespect and self-denial. This is Cassie Christopher, one amazingly self-aware, confident, and fun, up-and-coming F50 woman. Hey, F50 women. We are here today with Cassie Christopher, who helps women 45 and older to heal emotional eating and feel comfortable in their own skin by loving themselves well through self-care. So welcome, Cassie. And I am hesitating because this is just a real issue. And I know it's been a lifetime issue for me in so many ways, and I'm ready to be done. So I'm so happy that we have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I think a lot of people who struggle with emotional eating can relate to that, feeling like it's a lifetime issue, but especially with the pandemic and all the stress, it's gotten worse for a lot of people. And then I also find the menopausal transition, bringing up some different nervous system responses can make it worse. And so, this may be a really relevant topic for people, and I'm excited to get into it.
Yes, especially right now. So before we get into that stuff, let's just get to know you a little bit. Who were you as a younger woman? What did you want to be? Let's get to know you. Or you became the big Cassie.
I love this question because I had fun. I'm one of these people who likes to reflect. So I'm like, who was I?
Yeah.
I journal about it for a little bit. But it really informs who I am today. Like who I am today and what I do now would not have happened had it not been for who I was as a kid. And, I was thinking back, and I was the class president, likable nerd. Everybody maybe knew me because I was giving speeches to become class president. I was definitely type A, but boys didn't have crushes on me because I definitely was a nerd.
Okay.
To paint a picture of high school Cassie. And, what I've learned too, as I've done a lot of self-work, is I come from a family where both parents, were coming out of difficult situations growing up. I'm the oldest of two oldest. For instance, I was the first person to go to college in my family. So kind of give you an idea of this background. And I also grew up in a very authoritarian religious environment. And I'll be honest with you, I spent about 5 minutes Googling and looking up, what's it called? A word that's like another word?
Synonym.
Oh
synonym. Yeah.
I kept going to say syllabus. That's not it. Looking up synonyms for how to describe the religious environment. And I landed on authoritarian. I feel like that's right. Because it was a place where my desire to care, my feelings and my desires were seen as suspicious. And my desire to please others was kind of underscored and seen as a good thing. And so it kind of made it so that listening to myself and what I wanted, what I needed was not a part of who I was. I just kind of stuffed down how I was feeling in order to please other people, be the best, get the A kind of thing. So very accomplished young person, but also one who struggled with a lot of anxiety and depression and, and numbing myself with food, which is, ultimately comes into my story. I had fun thinking about when you said who you wanted to be when you grew up. I thought of it in terms of the jobs I wanted to have, which I always think is fun. So that's a good, party conversation or icebreaker, right?
Yes.
But I thought two kind of illustrated who I was well. One is I wanted to be an anesthesiologist. I mean, we're talking like a 10-year-old. People say, what do you want to be? An anesthesiologist.
Yes.
And people were like, oh, I can't believe you even know what that word is. You know what I mean?
I was going to say that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And it was like a word I had learned for someone who can make a lot of money and be really good at their job and, impress other people that I even knew what it was. And so that definitely played into the self-image that I was, developing, that ego side of things. Yeah. But another job is I thought about creating a magazine for teen girls to navigate how hard it was to be a teenager, because the magazines that I had access to were ones that either seemed too childish or too grown up. And they didn't really normalize the struggle or how hard it was outside of the pages of the embarrassing moments, column, which I read voraciously. I loved those things.
Okay.
and so that I feel like gives you a picture of how did somebody come to get into emotional eating? And I can see the connection with my past there pretty strongly.
And so where did the food come in? Because, we all have anxieties and we all have things, but I don't know if we always connect it to food.
Right. Yeah. So for me, I grew up in a family of emotional eaters. My mom tells stories of when she was pregnant with me, she would go to the convenience store every day after work to buy one of those ice cream drumsticks.
Okay.
So forever, that's the food that reminds her of being pregnant with her oldest daughter. Right.
Yes, me too.
I know. Yes. Right. I love it. It's so funny. And then I can remember too, I have such strong memories of my dad would run to the store, in the evening when it's cold and we're all in our house, he would go out and go to the store and he would buy chocolate bars for my mom, me, my two younger sisters, all these girls at home. And that was kind of how he showed his love was, giving us chocolate. And it's so funny because for a short while after my daughter was born, we were renovating our house and we were staying with my parents for a short time. And I remember my dad coming home, I bought you chocolate, and I'm like, wow, this is still his love language. Yeah. Yes. It was Hershey's. It wasn't even the good stuff. I've become a chocolate snob, since leaving home. And so certainly I was exposed to that level of caring for yourself with food. If it's been a hard day, you eat, and that makes you feel better. But the interesting thing is I didn't realize emotional eating was a problem for me. I probably didn't realize it was a problem until actually after I was already a dietitian, after my daughter was born, and I got diagnosed with some autoimmune issues.
Wow. Okay.
And, it's hindsight is 2020 because I can go back and I can see, wow, while I was in grad school studying nutrition, I had a lot of anxiety and I was at the school convenience store every single day buying my artisanal dark chocolate bar. And I would justify it because as emotional eaters, we do this mental gymnastics to justify our eating. I don't really care about this goal or, it doesn't really matter. It's just one and that one turns to however many. But I was like, it's dark chocolate. It's healthy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't even get that good with it.
Yeah, there you go. No shame.
No.
Because what is amazing about emotional eating, and as I recognize that I was struggling with emotional eating then, and I know more about it now, is that it works. The reason that we do it, the reason I did it then, is because it worked. It helped me survive one of the most stressful times in life, and a lot of that stress was self-imposed. It was that type A trying to be better than everyone else in a community of people who were all the top of their game. It's really hard to be better than everyone else in that, environment.
Yes.
And not really having any self-care or knowing self-care, how to care for myself or valuing that self-care outside of eating. And that was another piece too. And I think a lot of women experience this, the social conditioning that made me believe that my greatest worth and value to the world was not simply in my existence, because I'm a child of God, but it was what I could do for other people. And, how I served others. And so while I struggled in grad school with eating. And that was frustrating to me because I was learning, it was nutrition grad school. I was learning how to eat well and all of the diets. It actually wasn't until I was a new mom, like I say, that I realized emotional eating was an issue. And that's because something about becoming a mom, and I know a lot of women can relate to this, it was like that social conditioning that you really don't matter at all. And it's all about caring for everyone else. Just like a switch flipped, right?
Okay.
And I just stopped doing anything for myself. And I was doing everything to keep this kid alive. I probably was struggling with a little depression as well, looking back. But at the time, I was using Ritz crackers and Tillamook cheese, which is a Northwest, cheese brand.
Okay.
So you might not be familiar with it.
No, I'm not familiar with it, but okay.
If you're on the West Coast and you see it at the grocery store, I do recommend you buy it. But putting a little bit of that Tillamook cheese on a Ritz cracker with some apple, apple's healthy, right? Cheese is protein, like all of this. Again, the justifying, but I was eating a lot of it. And that was kind of my only self-care, was enjoying food in this way.
Okay.
So I ended up with a lot of inflammation because I actually have some dairy sensitivities, some wheat sensitivities. Like, these foods are not the best for my body. It's not to the point where I get anaphylaxis. So I can just have a little bit when I want. But I was doing it all the time. And what that happened was I ended up with a lot of inflammation. I was in a lot of physical pain. I ended up going to see a naturopath thinking I have to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I discovered I had some autoimmune issues.
Wow.
So there I was, autoimmune issues, knowing that what I'm eating isn't helping. And also knowing that all of the diets that I had tried, since I was, probably 12 years old, I did Weight Watchers with my mom for the first time. And then obviously in grad school, I'm learning about, how amazing kale is for you and how bad, white sugar is for you. Right. And trying all of those diets, which at the time, the popular thing was, I guess as it always is in some form or another, just like cutting out certain food groups.
Yes.
And so doing all of that, except for me, I could never do anything what I felt like was consistent. I could never stick to anything.
Yes.
It was like, I would do the cut out, the whatever, for a while. And then something would happen. I'd end up buying a tub of guacamole from Whole Foods, which have amazing guacamole, if anyone doesn't know.
Yeah.
Buying a tub of guacamole and a thing of tortilla chips and eating it and going, healthy fats. Isn't that interesting how the dietitian justifies, right?
Yeah.
Healthy fats, until I felt sick.
Yeah.
And then I felt guilty. Oh my gosh, how could I do this again? And then there's the self-criticism. You know better than to eat this much and to get uncomfortable. Why can't you just stick to, the XYZ diet that would make you feel good and solve all your problems and bring world peace?
Yes. That world peace thing. Yes.
That's right. It's going to solve all of my problems.
Solve
if I can
everything.
only stick to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course,
and why do we do that? Why do we think that that's the solution to all things? That's a real thought.
Yeah.
If I can just stick to this and get this right, everything will be fixed.
Yep. Can I tell you why? Is that a real question?
Yeah, it is.
2 reasons. First of all, we've been sold a bill of lies, essentially, and believing that diets are the answer, because diets aren't. And especially, I think the message that we're getting when we diet, when we go on these diets and from these, the dieting industry, is you don't know what's good for you.
Yes.
You cannot be trusted around food. You are a liability to yourself. So let me protect you from yourself by giving you this intricate system of, points or tracking or whatever to teach you to do the thing for you. And also, the second reason, beyond the world telling us we can't be trusted around food. And I want to honor that by saying, like, if you're struggling with emotional eating or binging or anything like that, you've probably experienced that you can't trust yourself around food. Like, you probably have that lived experience. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which we can definitely get into, but a lot of it has to do with hormone imbalance and, your thought patterns and this gymnastics, this mental gymnastics I talked about, where we just justify things, right? Like, it isn't that you can't trust yourself. It's just that, like, it's a really complicated and in many ways oppressive system that takes advantage of, our insecurities and tells us like, here's the solution, just do my plan and everything will work out.
Yes.
And that leads me to the second reason. So if the first is we're taught not to trust ourselves, the second is that trying to control what we eat or our weight is a way of coping when things feel out of control.
Yes.
And there's this model called the window of tolerance model created by Dan Segal, and he's a trauma therapist for children specifically. And man, does it ever apply to eating? If there ever was a model, cross-discipline model. And the idea is we all have this comfort zone or window of tolerance that we live in. And that's the place we can make good decisions from. That's where things roll off our back. We can handle stress. We're resilient. We can feel good in that place. And then something happens to push us out of our window of tolerance, out of our comfort zone. And we end up in either hyperarousal or hypoarousal, which is essentially that fight or flight or freeze space, and freeze being the hypoarousal. So that's where we get anxious. That's where we get depressed. Another coping mechanism when you're out of your window of tolerance is rigid food rules, trying to control what you can control, right? Like kind of grasping at straws. And really that gets to some disordered eating practices. Emotional eating's up there, binging is up there. These are things we do to make ourselves feel more comfortable when we are uncomfortable. And the really important thing, because I know just by who you talk to and what you talk about, that there's probably a lot of women in your audience who've done a lot of work around personal traumas.
Yes.
And if you're struggling with food, there is really amazing is the wrong word, but from a nerd's perspective, amazing correlation between trauma and disordered eating or food struggles or even weight. This trauma actually, what happens is if you've had a history of trauma, even if you've dealt with it, it can change your brain patterns so that you're more on edge, that your stress response is more likely to be kind of hair trigger. And you might end up more likely to be outside of your window of tolerance, or it's easier for you to get out of that window of tolerance. And maybe harder to get back in because that trauma brain kind of takes over.
And when you say the window of tolerance, getting outside the window of tolerance, explain to me what that means.
So imagine a time where you were able to make healthy choices fairly easily. You felt good, like things just kind of the stars were aligned with food. You're getting results you wanted, you had energy, etc. And then something happened at some point where none of that worked anymore. You didn't feel good. You were back to emotional eating. And that event is something that pushes you out of your window of tolerance. So that might be, something stressful. That might be something emotional. That might be just a long, hard day or lack of sleep. Like there's a lot of things that can push us out of our window of tolerance into emotional eating. And what I would say here that I think would be helpful is to back up a little bit and define what emotional eating even is.
Yes, that would be good. Yes.
Because I think we all kind of know, and yet
have a sense.
Exactly. And my working definition, and as I learn more and read more, I change it, but is using food to numb your emotions and or as a primary source of pleasure. So for me, when I had that young child, I was using it both ways as a way to feel good, as self-care, as pleasure, and also, as a way to numb what was really hard about that season and not necessarily have to deal with it or face it. And it wasn't really until I started to, decided like, it can't be this way anymore. I know the diets don't work.
Yeah.
I know that restricting and cutting things out doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I know that I am a strong, smart, capable woman who excels in almost every area of life,
Yeah.
except for with food.
Mhm.
I'm so frustrated. And what the heck is wrong with me?
So frustrating. Yes.
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 And so from there, I was lucky enough to also be working with a counselor and working on, these childhood issues that I
Okay.
shared at the beginning. And at the same time, working with my naturopath in lowering inflammation, recognizing my stress, really recognizing the stress and anxiety and starting to do something about that.
Okay.
And realizing how that was impacting me. And I realized that fixating on my weight was not helping me. And actually, that's another way I've seen now that when people are out of that comfort zone, they've had that inciting event to push them out of the window of tolerance,
Mhm.
that fixating on weight is also another way to control and to feel better.
Really?
Even though
I
it
mean,
feels bad because you're
yeah.
beating yourself up,
Right.
it's like the devil is how I would describe it.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
not being happy with yourself or your weight, that also feels like a socially acceptable way to kind of mistreat yourself, I
Yeah.
would argue.
I understand that. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, you could go do drugs, like, or you could try to lose weight. Like, how are
Right.
you gonna try to make yourself feel better in this moment?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. And
let's not choose drugs.
we're all, yes, exactly. And then we all sit around in the office or with our friends or whatever and say, oh yeah, I gained some weight, or, my pants are too tight. And we're all so willing to talk about, how big we are and how out of control we are with our food.
I think you're right. I think
Yeah.
that's really common.
Yeah.
And in your families will talk about it. Yeah. Girlfriends, like, this is something, that is really common. And, I went on this journey, and what I realized is this all or nothing approach that I had been taught to be healthy from dieting and school, really, and just life as well, right?
Yeah.
This all or nothing approach to eating and weight were really like setting us up for failure.
Okay.
That was the villain in this story, because when we believe we're either perfect or a failure, and those are our two options, we will always be a failure, because there's no such thing as perfect eating.
Right.
And also, most of the time, the diets that we're trying to follow are not actually sustainable. They're not things that a normal human can even be perfect at.
Yeah.
And so it's like setting ourselves up with these unrealistic expectations and then measuring our success by like the worst measuring rod ever.
Yeah.
There's no way for us to win unless we're doing everything perfectly. And when you're doing everything perfectly, it feels really good. You get a lot of dopamine from that. You get a lot of positive feedback in your brain. And so you want to go back there. So then we have these past experiences like, oh, I could do it for like a week, a month, a year, a couple years.
Yeah.
So if I could just get back there, right? World peace, like everything would be fine.
Yes. Everything would be fine. The pandemic would be gone if I could get my diet and my health.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is the all or nothing. And we have this kind of magical thinking associated with it as well.
Yeah.
And then it's the same with weight too. Like, culture tells us you either have to be a normal BMI or you're unhealthy. Culture tells us that you need to be small in order to find love, romantic love. And like, there's something wrong with you. Weight stigma is this stigma that there is something wrong with you. You're lazy, you're, unclean, whatever, if you live in a larger body.
Yes.
All of those things are false. You can live healthily in a larger body, and there's research to support that, right? Like, and your behaviors are really what matters, not the actual number on the scale.
Yeah.
And yet also, I recently was reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, and everyone needs to read this. I will be reading it 50 times. I'm also her biggest fan. So Brene Brown, if you're out there.
Yeah. Atlas of the Heart. Yeah. She's great.
Oh my gosh, so good. And one of the things that just punched me in the gut when I read it, and I'm not going to say the quote perfectly, but it was something to the effect of the pain you feel from social rejection is just, we feel it in the same places in our brain as physical pain. It is just as painful as physical pain.
Wow.
So this fear of social rejection because of your size, it's, if you've felt that rejection, like that is real pain. We can't just be like, oh, accept yourself and then everything will be fine. Like, no, there's a real, we have to recognize that there's some real pain associated with this.
There's a real physical thing going on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so for me, I had to replace that all or nothing thinking where I was either a perfect good dietitian when I was small and eating kale and chicken breasts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or anything less than that was I'm a fraud, I'm a failure, I'm a bad mom, right? Stuff gets roped into it that's like so weird, right? I had to replace that approach with self-compassion.
Okay.
And I had to learn that I could trust myself to make good choices for myself, because again, like that unlearning what diet culture tells us, that you don't know how to care for yourself. And then we have experiences when we're looking for them that prove that to us. And I had to learn, like, no, I am trustworthy with my body, with my needs. I mean, I had to get trustworthy too, because like I said, being a mom made me realize I didn't actually feel worthy of care unless I was caring for someone else. So again, some more unlearning that I had to do there.
Okay.
And also recognizing the impact on my nervous system. Like when your nervous system is upregulated, the research shows you're going to make unhealthy food choices.
Okay.
So it's not you. It's not you, it's that nervous system. And like, there's, I think also a lot of shame for women around being stressed. There's a lot of shame for women around living in a larger body. There's a lot of shame for women around what they eat. I mean, we're just passing out shame, like nobody's
everywhere.
business.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I want to be really mindful of that, because like, it makes sense that all of our nervous system is activated, right? Like, and it has nothing to do with you. It could be that past trauma. It could be some inflammation going on in your body. That nervous system activation isn't just because you're poorly managing your life and your feelings.
Okay. Yeah.
So I just want to put that out there.
Right.
So now I help my clients who've done the emotional work already, right? I'm not a therapist. So I work with people who've done the years and years of personal development, counseling. They've worked through their trauma, but they still something's going on with food. And they've never been able to connect to that great emotional work they've done to actually what's going on with food.
Okay.
I help them learn to trust themselves and to stop using food to numb or as the only source of pleasure. And I've got 4 key areas that I work with people around, if you'd like to hear.
Yes, absolutely. Those are the four pillars you talked about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So body, mind, heart, and soul.
Okay.
Are really the roots that we need to work on. And what I hope, first of all, that people are hearing is like, oh, but what about kale? Isn't kale the solution to emotional eating? I don't know why I'm picking on kale today.
Kale, spinach, salmon, and chicken breast.
Yes. Leafy greens, is that in there? And really, the truth is, if you're struggling with emotional eating where you're feeling out of control around food, you're using it to make yourself feel better, or you're using it to zone out, in a trance, right? Like you're just numbing what's difficult in life.
Yeah.
Food isn't the answer. Changing what you eat is actually taking away your one good coping mechanism.
Good point.
It's actually really mean to yourself. Yeah. It's a mean thing to do. And so I don't, I give people, I'm a dietitian, gosh, I can't help it. I give people the essentials that we need for food, but it's not all about food or, spending all of our time thinking about food. It's really about figuring out how to trust and care for ourselves. So the first way that we need to care for ourselves, that body pillar, is that nervous system that I already mentioned.
Okay.
And this is recognizing what's activating your nervous system and then doing what you can within your human, your humanness to address some of these things, but recognizing you don't have to do things perfectly. Okay. What it's really more about is getting to a place where you feel good enough so that you can recognize when the nervous system is a problem and starting to cause more of the eating. And so what I do with that is I get people balancing their blood sugar by eating regularly throughout the day, And this, again, like this is basically the basics of the food that I recommend for people, because all I would say, gosh, like 75% of the time when people come to me and they're like, Cassie, I'm struggling with eating on the couch after dinner, watching Netflix, hand to mouth, I can't stop. When we look back through the day, we see like, oh yeah, like you're just hungry at night because you didn't eat enough during the day. And that your blood sugar gets dysregulated when you're not eating regularly. And so that ends up causing more of that stress response that leads to more cravings. And so you can really calm that nervous system quite a bit just by eating regularly.
Okay.
It's like a pretty simple tip. If someone's like, oh man, yeah, that's me, I don't eat a lot during the day. Again, like paying attention to the self-care that you personally need and working that in. It's not about following some rigid plan. Right. It's about setting yourself up for success.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can relate to that one.
Yes. Yeah. So the nervous system for your body, and then there's mind. And this is paying attention to your thoughts. We've already talked about the mental gymnastics. There is a lot that our thoughts do to cause eating. That all or nothing thinking where you're looking at, an Oreo, and Oreos are like, I love them. So that's why they come up here. You're looking at the Oreo and you eat one and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten one. Well, I already ate one. I might as well have one.
Yes.
Well, I had
might as well have two.
Yeah. Well, two, it doesn't really matter if I have three. And then you're like, well, it's the calories. That's not that much more. It doesn't even matter. I might as well and then that turns into the entire carton of Oreos.
That's right. And then it's all gone. Yes.
And it's gone. And that's the all or nothing thought pattern. Yes. And so rather than, thinking like you're a failure if you have 3 or 2 or even 1, it's paying attention to your wins. And the win may have nothing to do with Oreos, and giving yourself credit for those partial wins. I shared with my audience the other day, I intended to do some yoga. So, I signed up with my local studio and they have Zoom, and I, get on the mat, which like in itself, showing up is like half the battle, right? But I'm showing up at home, and it's really easy to cop out at home.
It is.
And so, 20 minutes go by and I was just feeling really like funky that day, and that's kind of how I describe when I'm like weirdly emotional. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like very tired, and I'm like, I'm done. I turn it off at 20 minutes and I literally go take a nap. Now I could be mad at myself because I didn't do the full yoga, and I wish I had. Like it would have felt like an accomplishment. But instead I gave myself credit. Like, hey, 1/3 of a yoga session is still a good, it's still something. And then also, listening to my body and what I needed in order to go take that nap. Like that to me is also a big win, because I'm someone who struggles with feeling like I need to be productive all the time. So taking a nap is like a huge win for me, of my growth. Right. So I'm like, wow, I took a nap. Go me. And so seeing these partial successes, but then also, what also is going on that we need to recognize is when we label food as good or bad, which is also the all nothing here.
Yes.
It creates kind of that forbidden nature, like, oh, this is that bad food I can't have.
Yes.
And what happens is we get a greater hit of dopamine when we think about that food. Dopamine is the pleasure, the reward. It's also the motivation. Dopamine is really involved in motivation and learning. So when you think about that food, you get a lot of dopamine. You feel motivated to go eat an Oreo because it's forbidden. It's a bad food. So again, another way this all or nothing thinking is sabotaging our relationship with food. The nuance here, and I think why many of us might struggle with some of the like more feel good nutrition movements is a lot of them are like, nutrition doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you eat. Just like eat anything and, do whatever you want. And like, there's some good to that because you're not labeling food as good or bad, but there are foods that are objectively healthier than others.
Okay.
There are ways that you can eat that will put you at risk for diabetes or make your diabetes worse. And there are ways you can eat that are preventative, right?
Yeah.
And we can't ignore that. And I think it's really, it doesn't do people justice when we decide that people can't handle this nuance.
Right.
So with the
like
all
that
or nothing
pendulum swinging, it's like that pendulum swinging the whole different direction. Yeah.
Yeah. It's from all to nothing.
Yeah. Yes.
Every single bite you
That's
put in
right.
your mouth matters to none of it matters.
Yeah. It's like you're going from dead to dead again. Yeah.
Yes.
You're killing yourself on both ends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's finding what I find with my clients is when they've worked on healing their relationship with food, when they've gotten more compassionate, when they have allowed themselves to eat foods that previously were off limits, right? Or forbidden, and said, no, done that work in their brain of like, no, this is not forbidden. This is okay for me to eat. And like eaten it, in a context that used to feel not okay, and given themselves permission, right? Like they get to a place where they can enjoy, give themselves permission to enjoy Oreos when they've decided to eat Oreos, so that they are fully enjoying them. They're savoring them. They're enjoying the heck out of them, is what I say.
Yeah.
And then other times they say, no, right now I'm not going to have an Oreo. I'm going to give myself a boundary. The extra sugar is not something that's going to help my joints feel good, or whatever, right? It is for you. And as an act of self-care, I don't need that Oreo right now. And it does. And usually when they do that, it doesn't come from a place of like, I can't have the Oreo.
Yeah.
And therefore the dopamine is going to motivate me to want it. It's, I'm choosing not to, and I'm okay with it. And if I wanted it, I could have it, but that urge, desire isn't really there. I'm going to just say no for now.
Yeah. And just to back you up and to say how I absolutely agree is I have a coffee thing.
Okay. Tell me.
And I couldn't start my day without coffee. Not having coffee, I would say, I don't understand coffee's not bad. It's not mean. I'm not being mean by having my coffee. I like my coffee with the cream in it. And so I would do that mental gymnastics. But after a while, I started to realize when I drink the coffee, somehow it makes my joints hurt. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the calcium they say it takes. I don't know what it is. But after a while, I would stop and my joints would be better, and I'd drink it again and my bones would start. And so then I was just like, you know what? I don't really want the coffee because I don't want the pain.
Yep.
And when that happened, it was like, okay, I don't really need the coffee. I'm not struggling with it. Before, when I couldn't have it, it was like somebody was taking something from me. So it's a real thing, just making the choice because it's self-care and not because you can't have it.
Yeah. And you're connected to your body, and you trust yourself to know whether coffee is a good thing for you. Yes or no, and it's like, actually, no. And there probably are days, I don't know if you're anything like me, but there are days sometimes where I'm like, that thing that I know makes me feel not that great, I'm going to have it because, I want some, it sounds really good, or I'm at a social thing and I want to enjoy it with everyone, right? Like there are times where you can choose, and the difference is then you're giving yourself permission, as opposed to, just feeling like you're going against your own will and kind of violating your own values. And it just gets really weird, and it doesn't feel good.
Right. Yeah.
So body, mind, heart, and this is where we actually start talking about feeling. Because, and this is, I love on your website, and I'm just going to plug for you because so much I love it. At the top, is it f50women.com?
Yes.
At the top of the website, you can go and get your 30-day discomfort challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I read through this. I absolutely loved it. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm really actually thinking about it. I'm someone who thinks about something for a long time before I do anything. So this is good. We're on the path.
It's a good thing. Yeah.
Overthinkers Club over here. And so the idea here is we have to let ourselves be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. We have to hold space for discomfort, these emotions that we don't want to feel, the stress. And we have to do some work around accepting them, feeling them, getting curious around why are we so, unwilling to feel them. And that's really a journey. Mm-hmm. It's a journey, and it's one that you might have been on for a while, and you just have never actually applied to food. Yeah. And there's this great resource I use with my clients by Dr. Kristen Neff. Mm-hmm. And on YouTube, their mindfulness, self-compassion channel, you can Google, just type soft and soothing loud, it'll come up. Okay. And it's a 10-minute audio meditation that gives you a way to feel your feelings in a safe way. And
Okay.
it uses the principles of self-compassion, which are really important to safely feeling, because if you're mean to yourself, right, or you're not accepting that you're going to feel something, it's not going to be safe to feel.
Yeah.
It's just, it allows you to soften, to find where in your body you're feeling the feeling. You soften it, you soothe yourself, you say nice things to yourself, which feels weird at first, but just be uncomfortable. Do
Be
it
uncomfortable again. Yes.
Yes. And then a third, allow it to be there. And it doesn't take away the discomfort. It gives you a way to sit with it.
Yeah.
And by sitting with discomfort in your feelings, you don't actually need to eat. I had a client who wrote the best description of this I've ever seen, where she said she noticed she was feeling a lot of grief. There's a win right there. She noticed what she was feeling. Usually with emotional eating, we go straight into eating and we don't even notice what we're doing or why we're doing it.
Yes.
Because we get that little trigger and it's like, boop, don't want it. Let's go eat.
Yeah.
So she noticed she was feeling grief. She was curious about it. This non-judgmental curiosity is something we talk a lot about in my work. And she allowed that grief to be there. And she used some of her strategies to allow the discomfort to be there that she had learned. And she took care of her body the way it needed to be taken care of, with hydrating and, filling meals and right, all these things. And she said after about 5 hours, she started to feel better. And the grief kind of dissipated. And she didn't end up binging. And she was amazed, because before, grief was a huge trigger for her to hit the sugar.
Yeah.
And so for her to be able to go from someone who binged every time they felt grief to feeling the emotion and noticing, actually living the true experience that emotions dissipate when you feel them.
Yeah.
The old adage, feeling is healing, the only way out is through. I mean, those are so true.
Yeah.
And so what I love that she said at the end of it is, she said, I'm still rocking a 100% survival rate of big emotions, but now I'm doing it with self-love.
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow.
If that doesn't honor, right, the fact that emotional eating is working, like it's helping you survive, it's helping you feel good. And, there's a lot of reasons why you might be doing it. And yet there is a way to care for yourself without that extra food. I think, she's literally a poet in real life. And so I'm not surprised that her words move us all, right?
It came out so powerfully.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And then the fourth pillar that I mentioned is soul.
Okay.
And this is where we're thinking about purpose, and we're thinking about, desire, and what our desires are and what makes us feel good. And I find this is where a lot of us have to let go of people pleasing and let go of that societal conditioning that says our value and worth is based on what we do for other people, and step into, the truth that we are valuable just as we are. We are worthy of love and connection just as we are. In our current body size, with our current issues and problems, I'm always, again, living in that paradox. It's like people either believe you have to think that you're perfect in order to accept yourself and there's nothing wrong with you, or you hate yourself. No, there is this middle ground where we can love ourselves and know that we are worthy and our desires are good and get to go after them, because that feels fulfilling. When we feel fulfilled from life, we're not reaching for that satisfaction from food, right?
Yeah.
And so when we are worthy of all this love and connection on our own, what I've found is then you can clearly see the areas that you would like to grow as an act of self-love, rather than growing because there's something wrong with you and you don't like yourself.
Yeah. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
I urge the listeners to just rewind and listen to that again, because that's a lot. And it's a lot. It's very simple and straightforward, but really, really hard, because you really have to become conscious and self-loving, which we just don't do.
No, it is really, really brave and courageous.
Yes.
To decide to trust yourself, to put your eggs in that basket, to use a Midwestern phrase. Yeah. We're always
looking for someone else's answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I work with women who have followed all of the gurus, right? Like all the people of the moment. Dr. Atkins, right? Jenny Craig or Dr. Oz. all these people of the moment, and what are they saying I need to do
Yes.
To get the feeling that I want, or to get, the kind of socially acceptable or normative way of being, when it's so, I think the people who decide to work with me are the bravest people, because it's saying like, I don't care what the guru says anymore. I don't even necessarily care. I mean, as a dietitian, this is like, I shouldn't say this, but I don't even care what my doctor says, like I'm deciding what is best for me.
Yeah.
And I will be my own advocate. And it doesn't mean you think you have all the answers.
No.
It just means that you trust yourself to know when you need to get help.
Yeah.
If you are enjoying the F50 Woman podcast, don't forget to share your positive comments and ratings, and share us on all your favorite social media channels. F50 Woman is a movement created for women, spread by women. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show and your host, Julia Jack.
And, we talked about weight towards the beginning of this conversation. And I think what you said really comes back to what I've been thinking a lot around weight, and what I've been seeing works with my clients is I almost think you're going to have better outcomes if you can take a break from your weight. And that sounds so weird.
I'm trying.
Impossible.
No, I get it. But
yeah.
Feels impossible.
It feels impossible, but to decide to say, hey, I'm going to focus on my relationship with food, and I'm going to heal my relationship with food, so that it's easy to make the healthy choices. So it's easy to make the choices I want to make. And what I see is when people can get to a spot where they feel like their emotional eating is healed, that doesn't mean they never struggle, but it means they have the tools when they are struggling, and they can learn from that to make it better next time. When they get to that spot, I see them go, in several different paths with weight. They either say like, wow, in order to keep this healthy relationship with food, I'm going to, and my body, because we work on weight acceptance as well. I'm going to decide not to kind of pursue weight loss anymore. I'm going to live in my body the way I am, and, protect myself in that way. Other people will say, I would still like to lose weight. I'm realizing now that I have a healthy relationship with food that tweaking what I eat is not the answer. I need to go work with an inflammation specialist, a thyroid specialist, a digestive specialist. Like kind of the next thing becomes apparent once that relationship with food is healed.
Okay.
And those same people, I'm always like, okay, when you go to the specialist and they tell you to go on some crazy diet, like listen to yourself, really decide if you think that's going to be best for you and keep you in that safe spot that you're in.
Right.
But that's, my own fears coming out. And then the third place that people get is they often find when they're working on emotional eating, I've noticed if they don't have a lot of inflammation on board from certain health conditions, they usually will be losing some weight as it is. And they might decide to continue losing weight just by continuing their certain patterns, or, adding in different behaviors that feel additive for their self-care, that feels like they're not jeopardizing their relationship with food, and being able to do that.
Yeah.
But I really think people can't make the right choice for themselves around weight when their relationship with food is adversarial and distrustful.
Yeah. It's crazy making. I could tell you. Yeah. And do you think that for those individuals who their emotional eating pattern is they just don't do it because I'm talking personally. Okay. So that gets to a point where I'm so sick and tired of the Atkins and the this and the that and the other, the eat all meat, eat all vegetables, do shakes. I mean, I've done it all. Lemon diet. I've done it all. And for a year I lost all this weight. And then the next year it's like, what happened? I'm nothing. But so I get to a point where I'm just like, just forget it. And I can go from the morning when I wake up till my 6 o'clock at night and I have my cup of coffee and I'll drink my water. And then I come home at night, and as I'm cooking, I'm pretty much picking at everything that comes across my face.
Yep.
So, what do you say to those people who would just say, I'm just not going to bother with it? Or is that just the same pattern, just a different face?
It's the same pattern, different face.
Okay.
Yeah. Because that not feeding yourself throughout the day is not self-care and self-love. that's like, it's not self-trust.
Right.
It's choosing. And I'm saying this with love because you volunteered your personal experience.
Yes. I appreciate it. I'm looking for it. So yeah.
Thank you for being vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's another coping mechanism to not have to deal with the real issue.
Yeah.
Which is some issues
choose
with your relationship with food. And how that feels overwhelming and obsessive. And you know what I mean? Like you don't want to dive into that and deal with that. So you're choosing not to eat. And that's not the best for your body either.
Right. Yeah.
And yet it also makes so much sense why you would do that. Because exactly like you said, having to think, and then I see the analysis paralysis and the information overload, right? Everybody and their brother has advice and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's the best to do. And somehow I feel guilty and ashamed that I'm not doing any of it. If I try to think of some of it, it's
I've done all of it. And then I just go back to where I was before. Yeah.
A lot of us are walking around with this pretty messed up relationship with food. And like I say, it's the water we swim in. So we don't even notice it as a problem. But when your quality of life is being impacted such that, you're maybe not eating and then you're eating a lot later, right? Like you're having these eating practices that maybe aren't the healthiest. Like that's a blood sugar imbalance. That's causing some stress hormone, nervous system imbalance. It might end up leading to big cravings later. The thing I would just want to say to you and anyone else is, how can you be nice to yourself in that space?
Yeah.
Like, what does being nice to yourself look like?
Yeah.
Because self-compassion will solve the problem every time. And maybe solving the problem is being nice to myself means getting help, or, solving the problem is just talking about it with someone or whatever. Right. But whatever being nice looks like, sometimes it's a pat on the back.
Yes.
You're doing a good job.
Yeah. And being conscious of why. I think that's, at least for me, what I'm hearing from you is understanding why. Okay, so I'm not going to go eat lunch. Why?
Yep.
Oh, I have too much work to do. No, you don't have too much work to do. You can get up and eat some lunch. Why don't you just want to go get something and then have that conversation with yourself or with someone else? But that's a great tip. Just to really sit with, why am I doing this right now?
Yeah.
How does all of this relate to menopause, and how does menopause affect it?
Yes. Oh, I love this topic.
Yeah.
So people who go on my website and look through my photos will see that I am pre-menopausal. So I just want to throw that out there.
Right.
I have not personally experienced menopause, but as a practitioner, I have found that as I've learned more and more about what's happening to women in menopause, not enough people know, not enough people are talking about it. Women in menopause and perimenopause are under, serviced in this way. And oftentimes, my 70-year-old women who've been postmenopausal for, 20 years are taking a nutrition advice from 20-year-old, personal trainers who
don't know what that does to your body, your mind, your soul, and everything else.
Yes, exactly. And gosh, I'm younger than my clients all of the time. So I'm not saying like younger people can't know things, but I've never found that particular, arrangement to be advantageous. But what does menopause do? And so what we have to understand is menopause is different for everyone. Some people experience nothing, or a little, I'm uncomfortable for a moment and now I'm postmenopausal and everything is fine. Right. And then some women get all the symptoms. They have the hot flashes, they have the mood swings, they're put on medication to deal with it. It's not fair. It's the symptoms are not doled out fairly. And unfortunately, a lot of people's general practitioners don't know how to help. So one thing I'll say, a company I really love for anyone who's struggling with menopausal symptoms is Genev, Genev. And you can go to genev.com. Actually, I love them so much. They've given me a discount code. I get nothing for it, but you can use the code Cassie20 at checkout for 20% off. But you can get a 30-minute appointment with a menopause expert gynecologist on like Zoom, or it's telemedicine, for like $80 cash.
Okay.
Like super, super affordable expertise. And anyone I've ever sent to them who's struggling with these imbalances and really having a lot of symptoms has always been so grateful. And they're experts in hormone replacement, all this stuff. Okay. So first of all, if you're struggling, there is hope. These people are amazing. Second of all, how it affects food is there can be a big nervous system imbalance during the menopausal transition that people can get a lot more of that stress hormone cortisol. They can have a lot more cravings as a result. They might have mood swings and be needing to use food to numb these mood swings. Certainly the cortisol and the decreasing estrogen both relate to increased belly fat. So, and metabolism decreases. And so there can be changes that result in more obsession about weight or concern about weight, and then make you more likely to need to use food to numb. Interestingly, and every woman I've shared this with is like, oh, wow, I think that actually is true. Women in the age, their late 40s, 50s, research shows that is one of the most stressful times in a woman's life. Okay. So independent from menopause, you may be facing stress from aging parents, adult children, relationship changes, work changes. Like, I don't need to tell you guys, right? I don't need to tell, my Southern friends would say, y'all, what you're experiencing. But so that adds as well. So, if you've always struggled with weight, and most of the women I work with were put on diets from a young age, maybe 8, 9, maybe in their teen years. Some will found that this was only an issue, say, with menopause, but most have been struggling a long time. You're going to go back to those old ways of coping to try to control as well. So you might start obsessing about your weight and what you're eating as a way to control what feels uncontrollable. And then of course there's, the stress and eating as a result of that. So this menopausal transition can make emotional eating worse, and for some people, it's an amazing wake-up call to connect back to themselves and their bodies and trust themselves around food. Like making it, one of those things, like it gets worse before it gets better. I think in my experience working with women in this age bracket, that while I'm saying all of these symptoms that make it sound so terrible, it's an opportunity to connect to what these women want their relationship with food and their body to look like, and then work towards that. Okay. Right. To try to help them realize their vision in this new transition, in this new body, whatever. Yeah. Yes. Yes. As we start looking in the mirror, like, what's happening? What's happening to me? Are all emotional eaters fat? Are all emotional eaters fat people? That's a good question. No, certainly not. So number one, emotional eating is, it's normal and okay, just as it is. Also being fat is normal and okay. I'm not trying to draw this comparison. Right. But we think of the sitcom, you get in a breakup and you eat the pint of ice cream. Yeah. The thing that happens for emotional eaters is that the pint of ice cream becomes an everyday thing, because we're now using the pint of ice cream to deal not only with the breakup, but all of the other stressors in life. Some people have fast metabolisms and that maladaptive coping mechanism doesn't catch up to them. Or maybe they have disordered eating patterns that, go back and forth between anorexia and starving themselves and, something like this emotional eating where they're overeating or binge eating. I would say most of the women I work with live in larger bodies. They would identify as being fat because, and I myself live in a larger body. I carry a lot of my weight in my rear end. Yes, me too. So it doesn't really show up on Zoom, but if you see me, I'm only 5'3", it is a large pear shape. Right. Okay. Okay. And there's
I love it.
Yes, and there's definitely some work I've had to do about accepting my own body, as I shared. But living in a larger body is hard, and that often is part of the impetus to try to solve emotional eating for the women I work with. Is the weight really is an issue, or it can be a health factor as well. In the same way that there are some foods that are maybe not conducive to health. Living in a larger body is not as conducive to health as living in a normal weight body. Does that mean that you need to try to lose weight? No. And I think that's important, but there are some nuances here.
Okay. And are men emotional eaters too? Because as you're talking, I'm just thinking women.
Oh yeah, men are. I mean, I work only with women because I think, in my experience, men can be emotional eaters.
Okay.
And the men I've worked with, once they're aware of it and they know what they're doing, they can kind of solve it. That's not everyone, right? But
they think differently, and just society around them and eating is different. Them 100%. And their weight is different. Yeah. 100%. Them and their hair loss is different. Exactly. Them and their aging, everything's different.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. A man can be a silver fox, right?
Yes.
What's the feminine equivalent of that?
Yeah, I know. We got to try to find one.
We got to find a word.
Yes. So how do we help our children not to become emotional eaters?
Okay. Another resource for you is Ellen Satter. That's ELLYN SATTER. And she's got several books. Child of Mine is a good one. Any of her books are good. But she gives you a model to help children develop eating competence. So it is this called division of responsibility. And it says kids are responsible for whether they eat, how much they eat. And as a parent, you're responsible for where they eat. She recommends at the table. You're responsible for what you provide to them. I can't remember all the who's and the wherefores right here on the spot, but essentially setting it up so that your kids get to decide what they want to eat, how much they want to eat. You're always offering your nourishing foods, and you're what I love about her model, which I think the dessert portion is the coolest, and that we can learn something from even as adults is, she says, offer dessert with dinner. It's not this special thing that you get as a reward, because food isn't a reward. How many of us grew up with a Oreo blizzard as a reward? Again, with the Oreos, I must need to go eat some. And so you eat the dessert with dinner, and you get one serving at dinner, and that's dessert. But because we don't want that food to become, just forbidden, right? Or ooh, this thing I never get to have. Yeah. She says, occasionally offer a plate of Oreos for snack and let your kid eat as much as they want of that food. And that feels out of control to us, I think. Yeah. We feel wow, we cannot trust ourselves in a plate of Oreos. We will eat the whole thing we have in the past. We have the proof to show of it.
Yes.
And so setting your kid up with that self-trust, and if they eat too many, wow, you have a stomach ache. Yeah. You're having a stomach ache now that you ate too many Oreos, right? You can pass that on to them. And research supports Ellen Satter's model for kids with developmental, disabilities, with kids who live in larger bodies and are overweight, all kids across the spectrum, kids who undereat, picky eaters, all the people,
nice.
All the people. That's a great model for. And as adults, I think we can learn something too, because what I've noticed is when you trust yourself around food, and when you're in that window of tolerance where you're feeling good and you're not super stressed, you're not super emotional, you're dealing with your issues, right? It doesn't mean everything's perfect. It just means that you're holding space for what's difficult.
Yeah.
Without trying to shove it under the rug. You too can sit in front of a plate of Oreos and eat. Maybe you eat 5, right? Because you are hungry. It's snack. You need to get some calories in.
Yeah.
But it's 5, you eat 5, you give yourself that permission and you feel, satisfied, right? You feel good in your body. Maybe you're oh, I need a peanut butter sandwich to bulk that up, right? Because 5 Oreos isn't enough to eat.
Yeah.
you can trust yourself around that. And then that proves to you, yes, I can trust myself.
Yeah.
And you really can. You can develop that kind of relationship with food.
Yeah. Do you think, and you may have answered this question, but do you think this is more a societal issue? Is it the way we as a society think about food and talk about food and show food on TV and in the movies? Thinking about the movies when the girl breaks up with the guy and she eats a pint of ice cream, she still looks so darn sexy. She's skinny and she has something skimpy on, so I'm wondering if it's counteractable. You
Yes,
wonder if
diet
if we
culture. Oh yeah. Diet culture is a problem, but you know what I think is an even bigger problem than that? I don't think the problem is food or dieting. I think the problem is what we do to women.
Okay. I can see that.
Telling women that they need to look good in a skimpy outfit.
Yeah.
Like after their breakup, or, because eating ice cream is fine. Looking good in a skimpy outfit is fine. But showing that as this is the way forward, that's the problem. And this is the norm, and the expectation is for you to be tiny and sexy to your male overlords.
Yeah.
I went too far with it. I know. Sorry.
Right. She went there, ladies.
Yeah. I did. I can't, I would love to go there some more. So feel free to have me on your crazy feminist rant podcast if you wish like that.
Right.
But yeah, I really think the way that we're socialized, and, just off the holidays, many of my clients were like, wow, I had this client come in. She's like, what I realized one of my problems is with social gatherings. And I'm like, what? Like, I would love to know. She goes, it's people pleasing. She's like, I go to these places and I feel like if I don't put the food that they made for me on my plate and eat it and go on and on about how great it is, then I'm, failing as a guest.
Yeah.
And, if I don't get seconds, and I might not even want seconds. And then another thing she noticed is she didn't want to leave food on her plate because she felt like that was sending a bad message, right? Okay. Where probably the host doesn't even notice, but she's identifying that people pleasing is a really big problem. And, as we talked more, it's like probably some social anxiety there as well, like as we talk more, like the people pleasing and the eating is actually kind of numbing the social anxiety. And so, women are expected to be good guests. Right. Yeah. And I think that's a problem. I think I have a daughter and I'm trying to raise her as wild as possible.
Yeah.
She's outside, scrounging in the woods right now. No.
Okay. Right. If you met your younger self, what would you tell her about all of this?
Okay. So I'm not trying to be annoying, but here's my answer.
Okay. Give it to us. Yes.
I don't think I would want to tell her anything.
Really? Okay.
You know how, like if you go in the movies where they go back in time, if you go back in time, it messes up the future.
Yeah.
Like, I think everything I went through, I had to go through it. And I wish maybe some of it I could have gone through faster and earlier, or some of that. I mean, I want to avoid the pain, but the truth is learning to sit with pain and suffering and accept who I am and what I'm feeling and allow that to be there, and then learn from that and express my needs to the world and meet my own needs. Like, those are things that, I need. And I don't know, like, maybe I could have told myself something, but I really think I needed the experience, Okay. But if I had to choose something, because you said you have to choose something, it would be.
No, you don't have to choose anything. I think that's a beautiful answer, because I am starting to come to the point, when I first started this podcast and first started, trying to change the world outside of me losing weight and being skinny. I wanted to help people avoid some of those potholes. Yes. But now I'm coming to understand that some of those things are why people are so amazing and why they've built certain muscles. So maybe it's just a part of life. And if we go back and try to circumvent or change or alleviate some of that pain, we might have been more of a mess.
That's so beautiful. And I think for me, it's true that going through the hard things and then accepting that I'm in a hard thing in the moment, and accepting that I went through a hard thing in the past, and letting that be, and holding space in my heart and my life for that, I mean, I think it's made me a really cool person, but
Yeah. And I know you're going to be helping a lot of people now, because this is a really deep issue.
Yeah.
That we're all trying to solve by some kind of miracle pill. And I don't know about any of you ladies out there, but I'm tired. I don't want to follow any more programs. I'm tired. I'm getting too old.
Yeah. I just had a conversation with a woman who's like, I'm so tired of obsessing about this and thinking about it. She's like, if I work with you, will I, will my mind be freed? And I'm like, oh no. Because you have to go through it first. You have to overthink and think and understand why you're doing something, and how it's benefiting you, and have that self-compassion and unlearn and relearn. But then once you relearn, free as a bird, but you got to go through it.
You got to go through it. Yeah. So would you say that your challenge with health was the one big turning point for you?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. And the one book you would advise women to read, I know you mentioned one, and that was Atlas of the Heart.
That's a good one.
Is that the one, or is there another one?
Oh, I got to say another one, because Atlas of the Heart is so good. But really the key to healing emotional eating, getting started, is self-compassion. And so I would recommend the book Self-Compassion by Dr. Kristen Neff.
Okay, nice. And why would you recommend that one? Well, you said because of self-compassion, but what in the book do you think? Yeah.
So it lays out what self-compassion really is and how to apply it to your life and your thoughts. And I see self-compassion as the antidote to that all or nothing thinking, because when you're kind to yourself, it makes it safe to see, the little wins, and it kind of trains your brain to see that you're not a complete failure. And so that will allow you to build momentum on things that are working and on good habits. And it will allow you to, learn to trust yourself better. And just, I'll be honest with you, self-compassion feels a whole lot better than self-hatred and self-disgust.
Yes. I like that. I'm going to have to read that book, because I like that as an antidote.
Yes. And she's got a workbook that I really like. You could buy probably even instead of the book, if you're someone who likes to journal and kind of do more hands-on stuff. Her workbook of the same title, workbook, is really good too.
Okay, good. And so I remember the question I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask, before you go about healing this, your emotional addiction to food, because that's what I think, emotional addiction to food. Do you need to go through the counseling? Do 98% of the people you work with need to do that upfront work? I know some have come with it, but have you worked with anyone who, I don't know, maybe they become self-aware on their own? And how do you tell? How do you know the difference?
Yeah. For me, people who are into personal growth and development and are used to reflecting and kind of figuring out what they think about something, those are the people that I most enjoy working with. And yes, counseling is one way to get that. But so is just being someone who's a self-help junkie and that kind of thing. So it's not a prerequisite for working with people. I don't say I can't work with you. But there is a level of understanding that I think when I can say when they've gone through their past trauma, because if we start to get into hey, you went through this hard thing and that's causing you to do, to do the numbing now. I'm not a therapist. I can't unpack someone's childhood trauma with them. That would be, illegal and just very wrong. But I can say hey, that's impacting your relationship with food, and they can go and get the help for it. So I guess it's just, I find that the people who have done some of that work already, or they're willing to do the work while we're working together, have a therapist at the same time. Like those are the people who get the best results.
Okay. Nice. Well, listen, everyone out there, all you ladies, I suggest you hook up with Cassie because it's a lot to unpack. It's a lot of work to do, but it's important work because it's exhausting just worrying, thinking, agonizing over the thing you need to do every day, which is eat. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom. And two more questions before we leave. One is, what is next for you? Because we want to know if you have projects coming up, books or any of that. And then tell the audience how they can get in touch with you after this podcast is over.
Okay. What is next for me? So I am working with a messaging coach right now. And oh my gosh, it is so fun. Dr. Michelle Mazur, to anyone out there who needs help with their messaging, she's a stinking whiz. Okay. But I am an expert in nutrition and emotional eating. And so what I've learned through working with her is that often you also have to be an expert to understand what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because I like to talk about blood sugar and, theories. I mean, you've heard it already. So I'm really excited to just work with her on figuring out how to better share my message. And that's going to come out as a redesign of my core program, the Stressless Weight Mastery, sometime this year. I'm going to be making some changes to it that I've been thinking about, including, extending the program, working with people longer, really helping them see that it's a journey, rather than kind of a one and done thing, because healing emotional eating, as we've talked about, there's a lot involved. It is a journey. It's something you keep kind of shedding layers from. So that's coming up this year sometime. But if people want help with emotional eating, they certainly shouldn't feel like they have to wait for me to figure out how to talk about my message.
Definitely don't wait.
Don't wait. But I'm just super excited about that. So we'll see. Yeah, I'm just as curious as everyone else to see what comes of that.
And with that, individuals can do that program when it comes out before they engage with you one-on-one. So they don't have to do one before the other. They can do that program and then engage with you, or engage with you and then do the program.
Sure. And, all of my work, whether I work with groups or one-on-one with someone, gets to the same outcome of healing emotional eating. So people don't usually need to do, multiple types of programs with me. Yeah. Okay.
Because, sometimes people have introductory programs, but it's really just the beginning of getting deeper.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And I don't have that. I just have, here's how I help you heal emotional eating. And it's, it is an investment, and it does take a lot of time. And, there's no small bite offer, because you really can't get results with any sort of small bite offer.
Right. Yes. And I will just emphasize once again, you just got to do it, because I think it might not change the world, and it might not make the Earth rotate in a different direction or any of those phenomenal things, but it will, I know, world peace. That's what you said. Yes. But it will change your life, and it'll bring you peace. It'll bring us peace as women, especially as we get older. Let's get over it and move on.
I do think it'll change the world, though, man. If we're all kinder to ourselves, and we're, modeling this self-respect and self-love for others, and they are kinder to that domino effect, it leads to world peace. It really does.
Yes, I agree. That's a very good point, because oftentimes when we're mean to others, it's because there's something about ourselves that we just don't like.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So now tell us how the audience can get in touch with you after this podcast is over.
Yeah. So if you go to CassieChristopher.net/free, you can get my guide. It's a roadmap to help you figure out the best next step for you to heal emotional eating. It's called You're Done Dieting, but Still Want to Heal Emotional Eating. For those of us who are so sick of thinking about food, we do not want to go on another diet, but it is impacting our lives, and we want to do something about it. Again, that's CassieChristopher.net/free. And if you've heard me talking and you're like, forget it, I just want you to tell me what to do.
Yes.
I don't want to have to read a roadmap. You can book a compassionate clarity call with me on my website, CassieChristopher.net. The button is, right there in the middle of the page, and schedule a free consult call where I can really assess, where you've been, what it is you need to get the healing that you're looking for. And if I can help you, I will share exactly how. And if I can't, then I will refer you to someone who can, or give you a list of books to read. Like I will help you figure out how to get there.
Nice. Thank you so much for all this wisdom. Thank you for taking this extra time with us. I really appreciate it. And I know there's so much value in it. And I'm going to go get that roadmap.
Good. And you let me know.
I'll let you know. Yes, I will let you know for sure. Thank you so much, Cassie.
Yeah, take care. Bye, Julia.
You've been listening to the F50 Woman podcast. Join the F50 Woman movement and this diverse group of voices to help change the world one woman at a time. Why should you join at your age? Because we're not done yet.